listener production.
The creators of this podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which it is recorded. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the first storytellers of this land. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as any Indigenous people who may be listening today.
Everyone relax. This is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm William James Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching.
Good stuff, Will. We're back doing a podcast. I've done 2 today. This is my 3rd that I'm doing.
Is this really your 3rd? Like, yeah, I'm not just your sloppy seconds. I'm your what's your thirds? What's a TH sound? I'm your thrifty thirds. I'm your thirsty thirds. I'm your
throwback third, because you're my oldest podcasting partner. So I feel like, after dancing with some new podcast people, I need to go back to my throwback third.
We're in an open relationship, and you've just come home, and now we're just going to sit back and watch TV together, catch up on some Gogglebox.
Last of us, yeah. The thing about what we've learned about podcasting, I think, in the last couple of years is when we bank episodes, our lives are so much easier. There was a period last year where it was very hand to mouth. We would record, literally would come out a couple of days afterwards, and so there was this compulsion that you're on the treadmill. And then when I did that big overseas trip last year, we banked a bunch and we're like, you know what? It's actually not that hard. We're already here. Why don't we just do a couple in a row? And even if we give ourselves like a week's kind break, it makes it a lot easier. So now I'm starting to apply that philosophy to everything. I'm like, because I was never a kid who did my homework on Friday night. I was always a kid who was like, oh, fuck, it's 9 p.m. on a Sunday. Now I'll have a look at homework. But that old adage that your parents would say about, if you get your homework done early, you can enjoy the weekend. It's fucking true, mate. So I try and get my podcasting homework done early so I can enjoy a weekend.
That's what I'd like to be like with my comedy festival shows. It's not like I want to go to the Adelaide Fringe with no show and have to eat shit for a week to work out what it is. I'd love to arrive with a fully formed show that was just really fun to do every night. But unfortunately, part of the process is that I have to do that.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I was thinking about I had a little acting job on this week, and so I had to get my sister up to lend a hand amongst all the podcasting stuff. It's actually funny, this job. I'm not sure how much I can talk about it, but I can say that the character I was playing was a villain, like a bad guy in this teen drama.
How often have you played? I know that your character had some bad flaws in Home and Away, but have you ever played a proper villain in something?
My bread and butter is, I always say, I am the vanilla nice guy. If you've got like a love triangle you're setting up and you've got your bad boy, you need a bit of vanilla. You need a bit of kind of blandness to bounce that, those smoldering good looks.
And you've got your chocolate. You just need some vanilla to sit there to make up the Neapolitan.
I cleanse the palate before I have the really spicy meatball. That's what I'm saying. That's me. But I don't know, maybe it is actually a sign of where we're heading as a society, but now I'm a middle-aged, straight white guy. I'm entering my villain era.
You're the villain by nature.
Yeah. I'm the bad guy just by existing, just by the nature of my sex and when I was born, I am a villain. But
it's
the funny part,
point. Like if there was a period of time where you were like a Middle Eastern actor or like an Asian actor in Hollywood, like you were the go-to, just like you're generic villain. You're from Eastern Europe. You are generic villain for this period of time where like we've decided these are our generic villains. But now the villains of society, and we say that in the fun way, not in the Joe Rogan way, but the villains of society are like white middle-aged straight men.
Yeah, this is not
great career opportunity for you. We think it's great.
We are not entering the manosphere. Let me make that clear. Like this is not TOFOP's hard pivot to the right, where it's like, don't all women suck and they're useless and they just want your money. I mean, it would be very hard, right, a handbrake turn for us. But you're right, and it's funny because I said being a vanilla guy is my bread and butter, but more than that, being a supporting character was my bread and butter. I'd occasionally get a lead in a show here or there, but I was the dad or the best friend or whatever it is. But now it's like, because diversity inclusion is the thing, and so it's all like that's all out the window. But here's what they'll do: we'll cast a straight white guy in the lead role. That's still kind of like that's deemed okay, generally alongside someone like a woman or someone of color or whatever. But then all the supporting roles are like, okay, we don't need any more of you in this role. We don't need to fill out this next
That
tier
position
with you
is
guys.
filled.
We've got our one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The tokenism is we've got our one, and so you're now
we
filling out
often
these
we
roles,
often
which is,
find
look,
that
to be honest,
with Question Everything, we find that a little bit where I have to say to people who, particularly like straight white middle-aged men comedians, where they're like, "Hey, could I be on the show?" And I said, the main problem is that I'm already on the show. Like,
yeah, that's exactly
we've already got one
it's
of
like,
you.
can I be the
and
lead?
I'm
No,
it, and it's your fault.
Yeah. Yeah, could I read for the lead? No, we have Roger Corso. Oh, okay, cool, no problem.
Okay.
I understand.
It's all good. You need any villains? Because I could definitely be a villain.
So without giving too much away about the character, it's he's a dude who gets cancelled for his casual racism. That's the kind of, that's the angle of the storyline. But the funny thing about it, and what is so telling,
now, is he casually racist to one specific race, or to just in general casually racist?
To a specific character of a specific ethnic origin.
Yep.
But the thing about it was, when I read the audition, I didn't even read it as being racist. I was I'm so clearly that guy, because it's not explicit, it's coded language, and that's the sort of the whole thrust of the episode is like, how, racism can be coded into everyday interactions and systemic blah, 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 blah. But I did it was one of those things where it was just one scene I wanted to see, and I sort of read it in a rush, and it seemed, pretty easy. So I just put it down and sent it off. And then they gave me the part, and then they sent me the script, and I'm like, oh shit, this is a real bad
I'm a
dude.
racist?
I'm a racist. I didn't even fucking realize, because I didn't even acknowledge when I read this scene that, that language was coded. But of course, within context, I know. But then the funny part about it was...
Charlie exit scene, puts on hood, lights cross on fire. And you're like, yeah. But that's, I mean...
But the thing about it was... when I met the director, he said, "Oh, we really like your tape, and we like that you can ad lib, because we need someone who can ad lib a lot. There's got to be a lot of stuff for you, throwing lines out." Yeah. And so, you meet with there's a intimacy coordinator. So that's not just for kind of love scenes. That's also for, all right, if you're going to be ad libbing, what are the boundaries? Don't just start.
What can I mean, even in some like roast battles, not all of them, a lot of them are just like whatever you can go to. But even in the worst of them, there's often that sort of thing of going, look, I'm going to go hard, but is there anything that would be genuinely particularly hurtful to you if, like, I said that thing? And, people can sort of say what their safe areas are. So that makes a lot of sense to me, because like improvising insults of any kind, particularly if they have any sort of sexual or gender or race component to them, could be incredibly dangerous.
It's a minefield.
I mean, to be honest, when somebody says to me, "Hey, we think you're really great at improvising, also you're playing a racist," I'm seeing a lot of red flags.
Okay, so it's. I mean, first thing I'll say is I've been acting for 20 years, and intimacy coordinator is a fairly relatively new role on set. I'm sure bigger productions probably had it, but for most Aussie productions, which are fairly, run fairly cheaply, they probably couldn't afford that. But now apparently they're everywhere, and so good. I mean, not just for that stuff about like physical boundaries, when you're doing a kissing scene for the first time, a lot of actors when they're on these shows are 18, 19, this is all new stuff. And to be thrust into kind of this world where there's this expectation, to have an advocate there for you, a grown up there, someone to say, hang on, let's.
Yeah. Are you comfortable with this? Would you prefer if we did this in a different way?
That was not my experience the first time. My first on-screen kiss was, I had no idea what, and I even spoke to the drama coordinator and the dramaturg, and the rehearsal I did made things no better. In fact, I was more confused about, what was okay and what was not okay and all that kind of stuff. But now
because it was with John Wood on the set of Blue Heelers, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
How does this fit into the story?
I thought you were going to say with Robert Hughes on the set of Hey Dad. So that was great. But yeah, so I'm ad-libbing all these scenes, and every time we finish a take, the director is so like enthusiastic, like he's coming up, he's like, "That's great, so good." Like at the end of the first day, like gave me a hug, and I'm like, "Oh, that's good." And then I'm like, so what he's so excited about is I'm a real convincing middle-aged racist.
That's some real sweet racism you've been doing there today, buddy. Give us a cuddle. Just loved your racism. Come in here.
I just as the shoot went on, I'm like, man, I'm really good at this. And to be honest, and this is a scary part, I was enjoying it. Not the overt or the coded racism, but just the kind of, this character is meant to be a throwback to what, society is trying to move past, is these, established systemic powers and, certain roles. But within that is like freedom, because, I got to experience what it was like to be in a time when you could fucking say and do whatever you wanted and no one pulled you up on it. Like that was the experience.
Oh, I mean, I think about it all the time, like in regard to how easy it would be to be one of those like reactionary media commentators, because the bar of entry is so low on the talent scale for those jobs, because they're a sort of necessary part of the Steve Price or the Paul Murray or the Joe Hildebrands of these worlds, who are all these like semi-talented people at best, but like get these incredible media opportunities because they're just willing to make ridiculous hot takes constantly. And it's easy. Like just coming up with ridiculous hot takes all the time, as long as you don't actually have to come up with ones you believe in, because I'm sincerely of the belief that everybody in the world only has about 3 or 4 genuine hot takes, and then everything else is just ridiculous noise. So like this idea of being like an every 3 days, you've got to come up with some reactionary hot take. I think it's in the same way as you playing a racist person, like stepping in, like there's an element of like going, I understand why this is appealing to people, because there's a freedom in it and there's a like safety in it, not for the people that you are attacking. Clearly they're the ones but it's a power thing, isn't it? It puts you back in charge of things.
And like you said something about Andrew Bolt years ago, I remember we said like he has to, this has to be a performance. Like there's no way that one person can be so fixated on such kind of like meaningless issues so feverishly. And I think the one thing to come out of this Dominion Fox News case is, yeah, you're right. Like it is performative. Like those hosts genuinely do not believe what they're saying, but they know that they have an audience they're playing to and they've got to play the hits, which makes you kind of go, all right, we sort of, I think, the accepted wisdom is, Fox News and Newsmax, and even on the left, like MSNBC, there is some parochial cheerleading going on there. But it does make you wonder, as we sort of bead down on like more serious news, how much of it is entertainment? Like, is there anything that is really just, we have that kind of 1960s version of a newsreader in our head that just objectively delivering the news, but it's kind of all got to be performative to an extent, right?
I mean, even the way that the market has changed has meant that it has to be. Like, there was a time when headlines had to have some association with the article that they were stuck on the top of. But now, because the market, particularly, because of the online world, and, this always ends up being about money. So if it's not public broadcasting, then everything else is commercially driven and it's advertising driven. And the revenue model is that, clicks drive the advertising revenue you're getting, and more people click on a Kardashian story or a bikini story or a controversy story or a headline that at least implies that there is one of those sort of things, involved in the story.
And if you can get all of those in one headline, like the Kardashians photographed in a bikini while cheating on her husband, then boom, you got it.
Breaking her silence about cheating on her husband in a bikini. Yeah, like that would be exactly the sort of story. And then you click through and it'd be a story about the federal budget. Like that is pretty much the association. In fact, that's the way we should get people to read about the federal budget. People would read through a few paragraphs before, when does Kim Kardashian come into this? But I think that if that becomes the marketplace, if everything becomes this, like clickbait style world, that even the media organizations that isn't their natural forte, it's like when a sport changes the way that it plays and then everybody else has to say, do we just let this sporting team play the way they play and we'll trust the way that we play, or do we have to start playing like they play?
Yeah. Well, and what's the answer?
Oh, sorry, you wanted answers?
It's the media,
just extrapolating on the problem. Sorry, I was just reinforcing the point you were already making. I have no solutions.
The solution is obviously to be as widely read and as judicious with your media consumption as possible, but that's fucking hard. Like, it's really hard to kind of like do research and, well, actually not according to a lot of the people who live up my way. Apparently everyone's doing their own research up here.
It's easy to do research. It's hard to do good research. This would be the business model if I was in charge of it, right? So we know what drives the traffic, the Verity scores, the things that people are going to read about. So I believe it's got to be an eat your vegetables before you get your dessert approach. So I believe that if you want to unlock, so you see, you go down, you see this story about Kim Kardashian and her bikini breaking her silence about the affair she had. Kanye's probably mentioned because he's a good trigger word to get people interested as well. And then you go down to click on that, and then it gives you a list of other stories. And you have to read, say, like to unlock this one, you have to read 2 other stories, and then you will have to answer 2 questions. So like one might be about climate change and one's about like vaccines or something like that. You have to read both of those. There'll be a question at the end, and if you answer those questions, then you can unlock the story about the Kardashians. So basically it forces everyone to be an active consumer of good news before they can unlock the dessert news.
Well, so Iona has these educational apps on the iPad, which, they teach reading and hand-eye coordination, all this kind of stuff. And that's essentially how these programs, these games are designed. It's like, well, once you can correctly spell out, CAT, then you can move on and you get the little game and then you go back to another bit of learning. So we're saying we develop news reading apps for like that ostensibly are for children, but they're made for adults.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, I mean,
I would do that. I mean, if I got a tasty bit, like if it's got to be good, trashy clickbait shit, because I don't want one of those ones like, you remember that child star? Well, you'll never believe what they look like now. Like I've fallen for that once or twice and clicked through about 100 pages or something before. I'm like, oh, looks like a normal person. I want some juicy clickbait.
I understand, but this is why I think you have like a rating. So like next to each thing, like if it's really juicy, it's like, it might be some really great piece of royal gossip or something that people really want to read. And so, the Queen's last words.
Look at this giant shit that Prince Harry did.
Yeah, okay, that's right. We've found Prince Harry's written a sequel, and in it there's a picture of the biggest shit he ever took.
It's weird. Like he was in America, they put more water in the bowl, so it's one piece and it comes out of the lip of the bowl. And he's in the photo as well. He's doing a selfie. He's down there next to it, like making an O face. You can't believe how big his royal shit is. We have that photo.
Right. And so then there's 9 articles you have to read. So it's got like a little 9 next to it, and you have to read all 9 to get to that juicy. So they're weighted. So then you know. So say you'll never recognize, this star of the Goonies, what they look like now. That's maybe like you have to read this 1 article, and it's only 4 paragraphs.
Yeah, 1.
Yeah,
yeah. But Prince Harry's shit, that's a 9-articler.
Yeah. No, mate, you have to read the whole rest of the paper, and then we might let you see the shit.
I love that. I think that would work. I mean, the good thing about that too is it can sort of be geo kind of like, or the gossip and stuff. So for us, being AFL fans, it'd be like, what would it be? We've got up with John the Rat Platt, and you'll never believe what he looks like now.
Yes.
It's like, yeah. Okay, I'm down with that. Will, we've got a bulging mailbag, so I thought we'd just take this opportunity to get up to speed. It only dates back to kind of a month ago, but a lot of people want to chat about ChatGPT. In fact, and apologies in advance to this listener because I've had to forward this from Instagram or something, so I've lost your name, but thank you for sending this in. They asked ChatGPT, who is Radio Mike? Radio Mike, of course, formerly producer of TOFOP, current producer of Two Guys, One Cut. Mm-hmm. So this was the answer from ChatGPT. On the TOFOP 30 Foot of podcast, Radio Mike is a co-host alongside actor and comedian Will Anderson. Together, they discuss a range of topics from pop culture to personal anecdotes, often with a comedic slant. The podcast has a dedicated following, and Radio Mike's contributions have helped to establish him as a prominent figure, an Australian podcasting host. So, ChatGPT has erased me from existence, kind of merged all 3 of us. So we're like the holy trinity. So you're actor and comedian. So clearly they've mucked that up. And then obviously Radio Mike, he is swapped me out for, or the ChatGPT swapped me out for Radio Mike.
I mean, ChatGPT might have caught my 2-month run in the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne as Lysander in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and just been holding on to that information.
Was that with the cum trees? The cum smelling trees, right?
Yeah.
That's all I remember about that story.
You remember that? You remember that song? Give me a home among the cum trees.
All right. This is from John. Now, look, don't want to get you offside, Will, but he has some issue with you in regards to your belief that everyone should have listened to Radiohead or should know who Radiohead is. So just be prepared. There's some strong statements here. Feel free to respond.
So long ago, like to be holding on to this.
I know.
I mean.
He opens with a compliment. Hey, gents, thanks for the lovely comedy conversations. To cover off a couple of things, I'm a doctor, so we have to read it.
Okay, all right. Nice to have you here. I appreciate it.
I listened to TOFOP all the way through my first 2 degrees while studying for the GAMSAT, Aussie Grad Medical School exam, and then through med school. So not only do doctors listen to us, Will,
we make
while they save lives. We make doctors. There's a time to update the byline on this show. We create doctors. Have you seen a doctor recently? You can thank us.
Yeah, we're doc makers. Oh, documentaries. No doctors. We literally make doctors.
Yeah. Surgeons, GPs, gynecologists, you name it.
Yeah.
My wife, also a doctor, has listened, but only because I made her. But count her anyway. Yep. You can pad the stats. I can confirm I used a fax machine this week. The old school one, not even the nice digital one some hospitals have. And I have been here from the start. I found you guys in 2010 in the first year of the podcast after a recommendation on a forum. Wow. What kind of forum in 2010 would TOFOP have appeared in?
Penthouse forum.
Dear Penthouse. I never thought those stories were true. But I was listening to a podcast. The only person I've ever talked to about TOFOP who was already a fan was another doctor. Fucking hell, mate. We're just making doctors left, right, and center.
We're a doctor factory.
The doctor factory. I talked to him in my first week of working in a hospital. He suggested I stop bringing it up at work because it's an open secret. We all listen, but no one wants to accept responsibility for liking the early episodes before any of us knew better. Now I'm feeling like that's a joke. But I do want to believe that it's an open secret amongst Australia's medical professionals that they all listen to TOFOP. Like, wouldn't that just imagine if our podcast had done something so worthwhile. We had given back without even knowing it.
I think also there is an element when it comes to doctors that they see the worst that, like, much like, like murder police. I think that's the official name for them.
Yeah, pretty sure. Like, call the police. Why? Has it been a robbery? No, worse, a murder. Call the murder police.
So when the murder police, from what I've watched on TV, mostly Law and Order, when the murder police turn up, they cope with the murders that they see as murder police with like quite a dark sense of humor. And I imagine doctors would probably have the same. So what might be shocking to the sensibilities of, like, if you've got to see people at their worst, you've got to deal with like blood and feces and all these sort of things, that the idea of dealing with the early episodes of our podcast might not be as shocking to them as it would be to other more sensitive people.
Yeah, Blood and Feces, also the name of my high school band.
Yeah, loved them.
Down to the point of my email.
Yeah.
I was just listening to episode 311, about 3 years late. COVID sucked for me and I stopped listening to podcasts entirely for a couple of years, and I'm catching up. Maybe when you read this in 6 months, it will be up to date. Anyway, you certainly have listened to everything, John. Anyway, Will is getting upset about Ben Elton having never listened to OK Computer.
Yeah.
311 seems late. I feel like that was a much earlier discussion, but maybe we brought it up again in 311. Yes, he acknowledged that lots of people hadn't listened to the album, and it's specifically a social commentator having not listened to the album that surprised him. But Will said words to the effect of, and I quote, he would have heard bits of it, if not all of it, on the radio or movies, in ads or in shops. I was dubious. This is a Dr. Dubious, we're going to call John from now on.
Yeah.
Dr. Dubious. Now, I'm not of the same vintage. I'm a millennial, an actual one, not a 25-year-old. They're Zoomers. Bloody hell, he's schooling us left, right, and center, old Dr. Dubious.
I like this precision, though, in a doctor. Yeah. I feel like this is what I want from a doctor. Yeah. Like, he's certainly taking me apart with surgical precision, so let's strap ourselves in.
So I was in school when this album came out. I don't think I'm too young to have heard it. So I went and listened to the whole thing. I have never heard it, never heard any of these songs in their entirety. I can tell it was a big deal because I know I've heard similar music that was either inspired by the album or drew from the same inspirations. It kind of feels familiar, but also way off and alien. I vaguely recognize the piano from No Surprises. I think I've heard a karaoke version or no lyrics version of it in a film, or it was sampled in something. But none of the vocals sound in any way familiar in any of the songs. To be frank, I can't even agree that none of it is unlistenable. It's just not, but that's just my taste. My point being, I'm only about a decade younger, maybe less than you guys at this point, and it just wasn't part of my social consciousness. I think that maybe it felt bigger to Will than it actually was. I can't honestly point to any album from my lifetime that I would have expected people to have listened to. Fair enough, iTunes and buying singles plays into that, but if I had to pick an album everyone has heard, I'd have to go as far back as the Beatles or something. That is an interesting point.
So, but that's a young person's thing to think, because that is just generational. It's from a time when this was still, and I think this is why it is one of the most iconic albums of all time, is it changed music. It was the kind of height of that, British music scene. And it was where it evolved from being that, Blur and Oasis-y thing to being something completely different to that. And it was the sort of album that meant there was, bands like Coldplay. There hadn't been a group like that. That album was iconic in a time where albums were iconic. I am absolutely happy to agree that albums are not as iconic today. That makes a lot of sense to me. But Ben Elton isn't 10 years younger than me. Ben Elton is 10 years older than me. He's from a time where albums were even more important.
But do you think that's why it skipped past him? I wonder.
But this is the same as me not knowing, I know who Blackpink is. I've watched a documentary about Blackpink. I have an idea of what K-pop is. I can tell you who The Weeknd is, or when
who's Bad Bunny? Is that a rapper or a wrestler? I can't work it out.
Yep.
Because I've seen him at both.
I can't tell you. There you go. There's my blind spot. Bad Bunny. If there's some young comedian on a podcast complaining about the fact that I don't know who Bad Bunny is, I'm willing to wear that. But when the new Taylor Swift album comes out, I ever listen to the Taylor Swift album to see what the fuss is about. When, so-and-so plays the Super Bowl halftime, I do that because as a cultural commentator, you do have, if something is that big a cultural moment, I do think that, I still stand by I think it's weird that he thinks, and by the way, I think that it's okay maybe that a young person hasn't heard that album, but at the time, if you were an older person, that album was everywhere.
I wonder if, I'd like to ask Dr. Dubious John, if he's Nevermind. I'd say that of that era, that decade, that kind of 90s decade, Nevermind is the album, because it basically launched an entire music movement. Or, maybe it's The Chronic or something like that if you're into more hip hop. But I imagine that he would have heard of Nevermind. And if you are British, Radiohead were as influential or as big as Nirvana were.
It is. OK Computer is in a category with Nevermind as being a generational album because of the effect that it had on the broader industry. The way that you can see, even in Dr. Dubious admits in this email that even though he doesn't recognize the vocal or the music, he recognizes things that have clearly been inspired by that. That's the cultural imprint that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. He continues, I think that it was a huge deal for people in their formative years who are witnessing the birth of home computer and the GUI, graphic user interface like Windows 95 and the internet, but maybe it wasn't a revelation to people of Ben Elton's vintage. It's like how The Matrix is insanely important to everyone I knew in high school, but people who were 30 when it came out just recall Bullet Time and probably only saw it once.
Yeah, but that's like people saying, but that's the other thing is that's the equivalent of somebody saying, a movie like Hook or a movie sometimes you look at Minions or whatever. You look at a Next Generation.
Space Jam.
Yeah.
People love Space Jam.
But I watched all those movies. because I'm a cultural commentator, and if an entire generation of people is into something, I watched it. I'm not saying that Ben Elton had to dig it, but I'm aware that, there was a whole bunch of young people who liked Minions and like were dressing up and going to Minions. This is the point I was making.
I reckon if Ben Elton was the same age as Will, it would be way more weird that he hadn't heard the album. I'm curious if that changes Will's perspective at all. No, I think we've pretty much examined that. Anyway, cheers, gents. You've been a massive positive influence on me over the last decade plus, and Will has shared some reassuring words over Facebook years ago when I was in a dark place and sent a message. So thanks for always being there to make me laugh and drag me through shitty times to the good ones. You're welcome, John. As Will stated earlier, TOFOP, we make doctors.
We make them, and I've just clicked on a link here. So this is Pitchfork's best albums, best records between 1996 and 2021. So I'm just going to quickly see if I can find where on this list. Okay, so where do you think of Pitchfork, a big music magazine? Where did OK Computer by Radiohead come on? You know what? I'll give you some other albums that are in the top 10 just to give you a bit of a sense of what it might be. So number 10 was Wilco's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. For that style of music, that was kind of the OK Computer of alt country. Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City. Yep, iconic album by iconic artists. The Strokes' Is This It? Again, that's a pretty big gaming changing album. Arcade Fire Funeral at number 7. Yep, I get that. Frank Ocean's Blonde at number 6. Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, which was his Pulitzer Prize winning album, came in at number 5. Yep.
Number 4. So out of touch with
number 4
everything.
Was Radiohead with an album they made called In Rainbows. Number 3, Kanye West with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And at number 2 on Pitchfork's top 200 albums of the last 25 years is OK Computer by Radiohead. So Radiohead, another Radiohead album. They like Radiohead.
Really? I was going to say, I don't know if this is the most objective poll.
That's Pitchfork. It's like that's as big a music magazine as you get in the entire world. I mean, again, but that's the cultural impact of if you're looking at the fact that there are so many Radiohead entries in that list is indicative of the point I was making, I think.
Do you ever think how, like in movies, for instance, in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been this real kind of, and, TV shows with Stranger Things, this John Carpenter kind of, love, like all these people who grew up loving, John Carpenter movies that now they're making mainstream films. And John Carpenter was never really super successful. Like he was always admired and people could see his craft, but he never really had that E.T. moment, that breakthrough kind of big movie. Do you ever look at kind of artists who are sort of middling or, around the edges and wonder in 20 years' time who is going to be discovered? Like I think there is this weird kind of cheap reevaluation we have in our culture now where like Space Jam, for instance, like people look back at Space Jam and go, it was amazing. And you're like, no, you're remembering it wrong. It wasn't amazing, like objectively bad. But do you think that there are, is there some kind of like person who's making B grade whatever that will be elevated in 20 years' time has just been ahead of their time? There must be.
Yeah, I think that there probably is. It's hard to know. Like I find it sometimes even these days where there's somebody that you think is that person. Like, I mean, and this is what getting older is and keeping up with these things where you're like, 10 years ago, you're like, Kesha's like a joke, right? Like everyone thinks Kesha's funny. And then suddenly like 5 years later, you're like, everyone's like, Kesha's good now. Like, and you're like, you missed everything in between those two things. So I think that it's most likely going to be one of those, I mean, I'm not saying, because I think there's already a thing like that with Carly Rae Jepsen, there is like the indie people have embraced Carly Rae Jepsen as like partly ironically, but partly because they actually like the music.
Well, there's a lot to be said for being a survivor, right? An entertainment survivor. Like, you know, even with like Ray Ma on Home and Away, like he's been playing Alf for 30 years. And, you know, objectively, that's not like the greatest acting challenge, like you play the same character. But the fact that he's done it so consistently for so long, that becomes a thing that makes him beloved, you know? I think that we really appreciate the kind of people who just fucking hang in there. Like they can just stick with entertainment through all the ebbs and flows of entertainment. That person has just done their thing and they've done it well.
So do you think Ray Ma, like great actor and obviously has just iconically played this character, you know, forever on Australian television, do you think that he would ever do something else? Like, is there a renaissance? Like, could he be like, if they were making a Wolf Creek or whatever, you know, they're making a new Wolf Creek and you were like, let's take, you know, somebody who's iconically a friendly Australian, older character, but like give them a, you know, he's a straight white
like
man.
a Tarantino style.
Yeah, exactly. Could he, like,
for sure.
Could Quentin Tarantino, he's about to make his final movie. You know, he's announced that he's going to make his 10th and final film. Like, he's a big fan of Australian movies and entertainment. If he just said, you know what? Like, the John Jarratt thing's a bit problematic for me, so I'm gonna ring up Ray Ma and see if I can get him involved. Is there, like, do you think he's interested in doing anything else? But like, do you think when Home and Away finishes, if it ever does, that he will just, you know, retire? Because I mean, he'd have all the money he's ever needed in his life. But do you think that he would have like other thoughts or dreams or challenges?
Funny. I mean, Ray is like one of the friendliest, most personable dudes. Like for a guy, you know, who's been doing the same thing and has seen a billion actors come and go. Like he always treats every new cast member with the utmost respect. He's very engaged. He's not dismissive, like gives you the time and attention. But I don't think I ever discussed once with him, you know, other work. Like he's obviously incredibly comfortable with the role he's doing and what he is. But I don't know. That's my simple answer is, I think because he did there was that Snickers campaign. Do you remember that one?
Yep.
They did like an Australian version of that Joe Pesci thing where he was being so clearly like, if, you know, the money's right and the script's right, he'll do it.
Well, I've got a pitch. This is my pitch.
Yeah.
And it's like, remember there's the William.
I can get it to him.
There's a
so if it's good.
I don't know if it's good. I'm not sure that he would necessarily understand it. But so think William Shatner's spoken word album, quite an iconic, you know, album. And like Ray Ma has an iconic voice, like very identifiable Australian voice. So we get Ray Ma to re-record
spoken word album.
OK Computer by Radiohead. And we call it Radiohead.
What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? Off with his head now, bloody flaming galah. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. I mean, he'd probably be up for it. He's got a great sense of humor. Like, I think it gets to a point though, you know, where you just like, any job you say yes to or no to is based on how far is it from home? Like, do I have to, like, if you can minimize the inconveniences, we say, hey, Ray, we'll send you a producer and a recording kit. You don't even have to leave your house. You just need to read these pages. I reckon, you could be up for it for sure. But I think we just print off the lyrics. He reads them however we want, and then we match them to the music. That's how I think it should work. This is from Amanda talking about reluctant mediums and unfinished business. Hey guys, I'm listening to your Hospalooza episode. I want to talk about the presence of the dead. First off, reluctant psychics and mediums absolutely exist. Although that's not the main point of my email. A relative of mine is a reluctant medium, has struggled accepting it, and tells very, very few people. I only know this because they get messages from my little brother. That's all I'll say about that, because they are reluctant and it's their story to tell or not. I'm bloody keen to know more if she wants to talk about it. Do you think the presence of the dead always means they're unsettled in a negative or stuck way? Is it possible that their unfinished business is a choice? My little brother died when his kids were very young. He'd been sick most of his life, and being a father wasn't a love he'd ever thought he'd experience. I'm not saddened or even surprised that he may be in a place where he's watching his family grow without the pain of illness. Plus, I miss him like crazy, and I like that he sends us messages. Real or not, they bring me comfort. But how would that change the movie? Was Cole just an extra unlucky medium who could only see those who died under the most traumatic of circumstances? is there another child medium who only sees the ones that are just chilling, like at family barbecues or riding the school bus home with their kid on the first day of school? I like that. I mean, I don't know how it works, right? Like, I assume if you're tuned into the spirit world, he would see all of them. But in the context of the Sixth Sense, the only spirits visible are the ones with unfinished business. So
I feel like it would be, yes. So in that universe, well, no, that's all we understand it to be, because we're only hearing this through the ones
Cole's
that he can see, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if, for example, there is this broader range of, and let's keep it to the movie, because, like, I think that, however people find comfort in, believing that, the world, I don't know how the universe operates, and I'm not going to piss on anybody's parade if it gives you comfort to believe something that I don't believe. But in the world of the movie, let's just say
your
that
pivot into a hard right commentator is off to a bad start. That was far too compassionate. You conceded too much ground. You didn't call anyone a joker, a clown.
Let's keep it in the safe area of, in the movie
fictional
itself.
world of Sixth Sense.
So let's just say in the world of the Sixth Sense, all ghosts are apparent, including like these, just I want to, ride the bus with my kids to school or whatever, hang out ghosts.
Yeah.
But it would be overwhelming in that sense for because that would just be constantly like being surrounded by people talking to you, wouldn't it be?
Well,
if you could see
how many
all
people
the
have
ghosts,
died? Like
more
the
than have
planet
lived.
would be completely overpopulated.
It'd be packed. So
you got to see anyone.
You've got to only be able to see one specific type of like ghost, I think. So it's either that there is only that sort of ghost, or that one person is only a conduit for ghosts with unresolved issues, or ghosts that are just chilling and hanging out. Like, you don't need to know about them. They're fine. Don't solve their problems. They're happy how they are.
Well, Amanda continues with all the stuff that goes on here, or goes on there on a daily basis, plus past tragedies. How would a place like Bondi Beach look? Yes, very crowded. Can the dead talk to each other, or are they just singularly focused? Oh, that's a good point. Like, if you've got multiple ghosts, can they see each other?
Well, I mean, about otherwise, there's a lot of downtime, surely, right? Like, because
they're just talking when Cole's asleep. Then
right. What are they doing there? Do ghosts need to sleep? Yeah,
you just hear hear the click click and look up and you see a blue light in the corner of a ghost on his ghost phone.
I mean, you would think that you've got to find something to do in the downtime, even just in the toilet breaks and stuff, right? Like, when it's not like you want to go and watch your grandma have a poo or whatever, right? Like it.
All right. Yeah. So I was thinking more Cole. Like, I thought you're not going to watch a 10-year-old boy go.
I realized this. Yeah, but as soon as we were talking about the bathroom, I changed it to an old lady because I thought it was better than us talking about a young boy going to the toilet.
But you wouldn't follow him in. I mean, you're going to speak to him at some point anyway.
So what are you doing then? Are you just on ghost waiting, or is there like a realm that the ghosts go back to? Like, what are the ghosts doing in their downtime? Well,
clearly time doesn't pass in the same way it does on the mortal plane when you're a ghost, because you are kind of preserved, right? Like, ghosts stay in the form that they died in for however long until their unfinished business. So I don't think that, like, I just read this sci-fi book called We Are Legion. I think I've talked about this before. It's about this guy gets his consciousness uploaded into a computer, and he's able to slow or accelerate the passing of time the way it's perceived. And so he often powers down when there's nothing to kind of take in, and then powers up and it's like 1,000 years later or whatever. So I reckon that would be the experience. Like, so you've got you really need to see Cole because you're murdered and you need to let your loved ones know. And you see Cole get up and you're just about to go tell him, but then you say, oh, he's running to the bathroom. And so you would just turn off until you find another time
until he's back
again. Yeah. Well, wait. I mean, how long does it take for a kid to take a wee? I don't know. Like, I know it takes like 30 seconds.
But it might be like number 2 or whatever, right? Like,
it's just like, what did this kid eat? Been on that toilet for 10 minutes. I feel like I should go wake his parents up. Like, I don't want to scare him. I know I've got a bullet hole in my head, but I think they should check on their kid. Oh no, he's not taking a shit. I can hear another noise in there.
This is terrible. Like, see, then you're like outside twiddling your ghost thumbs while this like prepubescent boy discovers his own. Again, this is why I didn't want to make it about a young boy.
Okay. Amanda continues. What about the ghost? The ghosts who were killed horrifically but got justice and choose to stick around. Are they still terrifying? Is a decapitated ghost still scary when they're just there to go sunbaking?
Okay,
I mean, that's a good point. Like, yeah, you're murdered, but you're like, hey, I just want to chill. I just want to chill on the beach.
Yeah, it's weird that you would though.
Likely,
like, what's a ghost getting out of the beach?
Maybe just like the sound of it,
sense memory,
just the sense memory. You know, it's kind of psychosomatic, addict insane. A pervert's more likely to choose to stick around than race car drivers. Why is that? Why? All right, yeah, because peeping toms. But why are race car drivers happy to go? Because they're like, hey man, live fast, die young.
Yeah, I guess so.
Is that what race car drivers say?
And also, my life on Earth was just driving around in circles. It wasn't actually that interesting.
Or are you only allowed the choice when there's a legitimate reason to stick around? I'm actually hoping that's the case now that I've had the thought about the perverts. Okay. Thank you for your content. My entry point was Will's work on Dollop, and then I happened to listen to an episode of Two Guys that played after Dave or Gareth on TOFOP. And then I thought, if I enjoyed the two of you talking about sport that doesn't exist in my country, I don't think it does. It does. There is a USAFL, I believe. I don't know the difference between all the rugbies you guys have. Oh, well, there's two rugbies.
Two rugbies, and there is a difference between them. One's rugby union and one's rugby league.
I understood it one time where I was just the level of drunk where I'm good at pool in the bar, but I kept drinking, so it didn't stick. Anyway, I'd probably love the two old mates one, and I do. All right. Well, so thank you so much for writing in, Amanda.
Appreciate it.
This next bit of mail. Oh, yeah, this is funny. This is from Lockie. G'day, Will and Charlie. Very long time listener, first time email, blah, blah, blah. I'll get to the Russell Crowe monument from my subject heading, but first a brief note on TOFOP surfing. I'm fairly certain it was late 2018 when the two of you discussed having never learnt how to surf, but being interested. Part of the conversation was around sharks being a barrier. You then discussed a hypothetical scenario of learning in a pool if that ever became possible. The conversation stuck out to me because at the time, Australia's first proper wave pool was under construction in Tullamarine. I'm not sure that Will's hips would allow it, but Charlie, Urban Surf in Melbourne has been up and running for a while. You can pay for lessons there and be guaranteed of consistent, appropriate waves in the beginner sessions. Pretty sure there's one on the way to Sydney too. You know what? I actually have been thinking about surfing because of where we live, and I've been at the beach so much, and I'm scared of drowning. I can swim. I can swim okay, but the idea of just being caught out of my depth in a rip or like big waves or something, and I would go out in small waves, but then, a swell kicks up or something. It holds me back. I want to commit, Will, but I don't want to like be a wuss about it. Can I be a wuss? Can I have a surfboard on my roof rack if I never use it?
I imagine you absolutely can. You're going to have a couple of like small bits of conversation. Like if a surfer came up to you and said
I'll
something.
Be exposed.
Would you be able to make
I'll be
any
like one of the
surfing,
Beach Boys.
Would you be able to make any surfing small chat? Surely you pick some up for some scripts on Home and Away. It's set at a surf community. So you must have some terms that you'd be able to drop in.
Yeah, I'm fully stoked.
Yeah.
The waves were offshore, 6 foot and glassy. Hang 10.
Hang 10. I reckon Hang 10 is the one that gets you exposed as an undercover cop. I feel like up until then you might have been okay, but as soon as you say Hang 10, they're like, all right, Grandpa, no thank you.
Okay, Lucky says, anyway, on to the Russell Crowe monument, not a typo in the surname. So the Russell Crowe is spelt C-R-O-W, no E. I got this from a mate who moved to Canberra and was giving me a tour of their visit last year. There is a giant monument in Canberra with an American eagle perched atop of a huge column. Mm-hmm. Do you know what he's talking about from your time in Canberra?
What? And funnily enough, I was just in Canberra like a couple of weekends ago, and no, I don't.
Okay, it's officially called the Australian-American Memorial and is supposed to symbolize Australian-American joint efforts in combat. It is located on a small hill close to the Australian Defence Force in the suburb of Russell. It is affectionately known.
I know
to the locals.
I know where they're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's affectionately known by the locals by a couple of different nicknames, one of them being the Russell Crowe. Enjoy. Why What have I missed there? That letter? It feels like there should be another
it's in a place called Russell, and it's a
the
statue
Russell
of a
Crowe,
bird. Therefore, it's the Russell Crowe.
Oh, right. Sorry. I kept expecting, and then there was a crow on the Russell Crowe. I thought there was going to be one more beat.
Expected something a little bit better. I understand that. It was
sorry. No, Lockie, don't listen to Will. I loved it. It was the best letter I've ever
You're
read.
like, I was just expecting for it to get good in a minute, but it didn't. No.
I'm so sorry. That's not what I meant. That sounds awful. Hey, more ChatGPT stuff. And this is from Lee. Hey, guys, first time, long time, blah, blah, blah. ChatGPT agrees with Charlie. And look, we've dusted off some old TOFOP tropes, but
awesome
and awesome do rhyme.
Yeah, all right, ChatGPT.
So this is Lee wrote in, does Clawson rhyme with awesome? ChatGPT responded, yes, Clawson and awesome do rhyme. They both end with the sound sen, and it's an upside down E, so I guess it's like a phonetic kind of guide, which is a common sound in many English words and makes them sound alike when pronounced. Then Lee wrote, can you explain in more depth with some other examples? Sure, I'd be happy to provide more examples and explain in more depth. Clawson and awesome rhyme because they both end with the same sound, which is often represented in the International Phonetic Alphabet,
and one is
IPA, as S upside down EN. This sound is known as a syllabic nasal consonant, which means it functions as both a consonant and a vowel in a syllable.
Yeah.
Here are some other words that rhyme with a sin sound as Clawson and awesome.
Yeah. All right.
I don't agree with any of these.
No.
Okay. So I'll just say Clawson and then the word.
Yeah. Great.
Clawson, tension.
No.
Clawson, lesson. Clawson, fusion. Clawson, mansion.
No.
Clawson, poison.
No.
Clawson, season.
Clawson, season. No.
As you can hear, all these words rhyme with each other and with Clawson and awesome because they share the same ending sound.
Well, thank you.
I don't think those words rhyme with each other.
Thank you for proving
fusion, mansion, poison, season.
My point, ChatGPT. I appreciate it very much.
Oh man, yeah, that ChatGPT did a terrible job of defending me. I listened to a song today that had a lyric that was like, it's not even vaguely Clawson awesome, and they got away with it. Okay, this is from Jess. Hi, Will and Charlie. Just writing in as a long-time listener, Patreon subscriber, and long-time appreciator of your content. Charlie, as a very young teen, I had a big crush on you in Blue Heelers. And Will, I used to religiously read your column in the Good Weekend mag in the paper so many years ago. I also want to congratulate Will on his new show. I attended the Hobart one, and I absolutely loved it. Firstly, I know you have felt like Will Eagle was your best show, but I think Willuminate has topped it. Did you write this email, Will? Is this you?
It's very nice to hear, I will say, because I'm still in the period of time where I'm trying to work out, that's very nice to hear. Thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
Thank you, Jess. I was genuinely happy to see the type of people who turned up to the show. I mean, I shouldn't have been worried, but I had been to see Carl Barron a few weeks earlier, and I've only been living in Tassie for 2 years. So let's just say the crowd was eye-opening for me. All right, now, we started the show talking about coded language. You might have to deconstruct that for this. What is it? What is wrong? Is it white men? Is it so white men again? Is that the problem with the crowd?
Well, I mean, no, the thing about – so here's what I will say about my crowd in Hobart. There is like Hobart is such a beautiful fucking city. Like, I love it. And the coffee culture, like, it's got to be per capita. Like, there's got to be as many coffee shops, I reckon, in Hobart as there is in Melbourne at the moment. Like, it's incredible down there, beautiful down by the water. And there is this kind of ABC, my sort of crowd who are, like, I love doing shows down there. Like, it's just really fun. You never, everyone's kind of on side.
ABC crowd. Now, look, I do understand coded language. I know what that's fucking. You're bloody left bloody latte sipping bloody inner city elites. That's what you're saying.
500 or 600 of them who roll out. About 2% of the population of Hobart will come along and see the show.
They ride their fixies or drive their Priuses to your show.
And
they get their gluten-free or alcohol-free beer.
And they pop down to the Salamanca markets for all their fruit and vegetables on a Saturday morning. That's exactly right, Charlie.
In their reusable shopping bags, it must be pointed out.
And they take them down to the Save the Rainforest rally that they're going to later in the day. So, yes. And then Carl. I mean, Carl's genius. And like, I mean, I have nothing but admiration for Carl, but he's like, we joke about it on our other podcast that he's always AFL players' favorite,
most popular
comedian, and he's everyone's favorite comedian. And when you open your target audience up to everyone, that means everyone. Like, there is just some people who I think that would never ever go to another comedy night but go to Carl Barron. Like, this is the one time in their year or however, like, they go and see Carl Barron when he comes to town, and then they go and see Carl Barron when he comes back to town, and they never ever go and see any other comedy other than that, which I imagine is what that is the implication, perhaps.
She said, I moved from New South Wales, Newcastle, and so I thought I had a handle on, she explains it right here. I thought I had a handle on bogans. Turns out I didn't. Anyway, of course it was going to be a different crowd, and I should have been surprised, but I was excited to see that you had chosen to come down and gig here, because not much comes to Hobart. I was a little worried that the special Tassie breed of bogan, it might scare you off from coming back again. I also want to say thank you for your healthcare bit. I was one of about 3 people who clapped when you asked and did enjoy the round of applause that followed. What did you say? Is any did I make any of you? Are there any doctors out there that I made with my podcast TOFOP?
You know, the funny thing
How many of you owe your careers to me?
I have a bit about healthcare workers in the show, and I won't give away the bit, but it involves getting the audience to applaud for the healthcare workers. And then there's a bit of a rug pull that comes with it. But it would be great if in my next show, when everybody like is applauding the healthcare workers, I just screamed at them, I made you.
Don't forget where you came from, fam. Don't forget. This is from Jocelyn. Time travel movies. Hey, Will and Charlie. I know I could look up the article for the remaining 11 time travel movies being discussed. Well, don't worry about it. We do a part 2.
Yes.
But as soon as you mentioned that a frozen person waking up in a new era, aka Austin Powers, is classed as time travel, all I could think of was Encino Man. It's been 25 years since I've seen it, but I imagine it holds up terribly. Even still now, I want to find it. Thoughts? I remember enjoying that a lot in the 90s. I don't think it would be that. I mean, I think it would be of its time.
Yes.
The fashion on its own, it would be incredibly 90s. I seem to recall Brendan Fraser having like hammer pants, kind of like a simply red Mick Hucknall haircut. I think and it was a PG film. It was a kid's film. I can't remember.
So maybe this is like when you were asking the questions earlier about like what gets the Renaissance. So maybe, so like Brendan Fraser has just obviously had his big Renaissance, and there was a lot of affection for Brendan Fraser from a certain generation, despite the fact that kind of the majority of his stuff that he was doing was Encino Man, The Mummy, like these sort of like not necessarily the most credible, films at the time. So maybe that's a more accurate thing. Who's making a bunch of those things now that you could see people look at? Like, who's a bit of not a generic actor, because he was, a star of the time, but he wasn't.
Who's a joke? Like, kind of the way Statham was a bit of a joke, and then again he just outlasted the jokes, and it's like, oh, we actually kind of like him. He's been around for enough. So, and even Keanu in a way, like Keanu was like, oh, wouldn't, and then he outlasted that. So who would it be? Like, who's an actor that everyone just like fucking rags on? Thinks they're shit. Because it's hard to know because there's so many streaming shows, and would it be someone like the most loathed, but popular, like a Logan Paul, right?
Yeah.
Logan Paul is sort of a multimedia star, is wrestling at the moment, but you could easily see him transitioning into movies, and we all think he's like entirely questionable and borderline criminal with his crypto schemes and all that kind of shit, but what about in 20 years' time? People like, he was a disruptor, man. He was the fucking Andy Kaufman of the time. Like he was the first legitimate YouTube star, and that's who we're making the biopic of, where we've cast Daniel Day-Lewis's son.
Daniel Day-Lewis Jr.
Yeah. Well, Daniel Day-Lewis is such a good actor, he could play Logan Paul 20 years in the future.
No, Daniel Day-Lewis is such a good actor that he's been playing his son for years. Waiting for this opportunity, and nobody knew. He's been undercover as his own son to relaunch his acting career.
Why don't we finish up with one final letter? This is from Ben. Listening preference. This is just more, Ben wants to give back to us.
Okay.
Hey guys, Love your work on all the pods. They're the highlight of my week. I want to know if where we listen to TOFOP matters to you guys. Like, would it be best for me to listen on the listener app like I do for Two Guys, One Cup so that the higher ups can see the listening numbers? Or does how I listen not affect you guys and the support you receive in any way? Blah, blah, blah. He talks about what he listens to. No, doesn't matter. Look, it all comes. The reason why Two Guys, One Cup is exclusively on the listener app is they are paying us a wage to do it. So that's the trade-off. The other shows, it's a sponsorship deal. So when we get ads, that they give us a little bit of that money. So therefore it's available everywhere. But all the data is fed in. So appreciate you asking, but no, it's fine. You can listen to the other pods whatever's convenient for you. And thank you to everyone who has downloaded the listener app and is listening on to Two Guys, One Cup. A couple of weeks ago, we put an episode in the TOFOP feed for those of you holding back or haven't downloaded the listener app, so you can hear what the show sounds like. Trust me, it's good. I feel like, the production support we're getting with listener is making for a better show. So if you're curious to hear what Two Guys, One Cup sounds like, but you're holding off on the app, just go into the TOFOP feed. You will find an episode of Two Guys, One Cup that is available on all platforms. And here's a radical thought. If you like it, why not download the listener app? It's free. You can listen to a new episode of Two Guys, One Cup every Tuesday with tips coming out on a Thursday.
Listener app is very good for listening to the footy live if you happen to be all around the country. That's what I've been using the listener app for a bit as I've been travelling, is that it's very easy to just go on there and listen to their coverage of the football. So can I speak of another podcast? So Willosophy has been back with a couple of new episodes. I don't know if it's going to continue with new episodes, but there's a couple of ones that I did at the Sydney Opera House live. Nish Kumar and Virdas are both there, but also at the point of us recording this, there has been 2 new episodes, one with Mandy Nolan, who's a comedian from this part of the world who ran for federal parliament and is doing a show all about that, and she's just great. And then our great friend, regular TOFOP guest, but his first time on the Willosophy podcast, Justin Hamilton, is my second guest.
What? Is that right?
Yeah. He's never been on Willosophy because it was always about TOFOP, and we thought we had that. But Willosophy is a very different show, and I wanted the opportunity
it's a very different show,
to sit down and talk to him about his life philosophy, but it was a very weird, because often when I'm doing Willosophy, I know something about the people, but I don't know every single one of their stories. Whereas with Justin,
right.
And you could tell he was also going out of his way to try to think of things that I might not know about. So there genuinely was some things, but we had to work hard to get there. But it was a brilliant chat and great to get his perspective on life and and everything that he thinks about both his life and his work. So Mandy Nolan, Justin Hamilton, if you like those, they are on the Willosophy feed.
That is very exciting. And don't forget, best way to support the show still, even though we are in league with a big corporate audio producer, is to support us on the Patreon. That money goes straight to us, and that means we can put out more content for you, which we love doing. So patreon.com/TOFOP. Bonus episodes of the show go up every 2 weeks. I put a poll on Patreon asking what more did you guys want? And you just said you just wanted more podcasts. So that's what we're giving you, more podcasts. Might go into some behind-the-scenes stuff as well, because I know that was the second most requested thing. But if you'd like to see our faces or would like to see more of our faces, we put highlights of the show every week up on YouTube, TOFOP TV. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter, where you'll get some video highlights each week as well.
I am on. I'm on tour.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I'm on tour at the moment. My show Illuminate, which
You're
you might have heard
Melbourne.
earlier, is quite good, apparently. So
yeah, really good. Better than your last one, whatever that one was called.
Very excited about that. So you can catch Willogical on ABC Ivy. You can catch the new show Illuminate all around the country. At the moment, it's at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, but after that, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, Townsville, and other dates to be added. I would love to see you at one of those shows. And of course, my book, I Am Not Fine, Thanks, is still available.
See you later. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson.
Everyone relax. Fucking stupid.
Listener.